Now we're gonna take a look at the kind of system we have in South Africa and why we need to break it and destroy it. It's a capitalist system that was set up by the then colonial system, which was the British, and later on taken over by the United States. Now, in this system, we have three primary sectors which fall under the banner which will say is the banner of the means of production. Now the first sector would be what we call the primary sector, of course, and then the second sector would be what we call the secondary sector and the tertiary sector. you know as how they teach in economics, the primary sector, of course, we know is the raw side of materials, what we have, your gold, your timber, everything that is raw. And your secondary sector is when you start to manufacture and begin to produce commodities and products out of this uh, raw material that you've acquired from the primary sector. Then you move into the tertiary sector. Now, the tertiary sector is your financial side of things, where you do your sales, where you do your marketing and all this other stuff. Now in South Africa we have these three, but you will find that these three sectors, which are the means of production, are owned by like a few people. When we say a few people, we're talking about maybe 10% of the population. To give an example, owns this whole sector. Now beneath this sector will be having the government. Now the government is where we have the three legs. It's where we'll have our legislature, we'll have our executive, and we'll have our judiciary. But now, if the government does not own the raw material of its nation, does not own the manufacturing side of its nation, and does not own the financial side of its nation, it therefore means that these three sectors will dictate to the government what needs to happen in that certain nation, which, for example, it's South Africa currently. So therefore the government becomes powerless. The government becomes more like a regulator rather than the controller of the means of production. It only brings about laws to regulate, but those laws are also dictated too by the three sectors, which are the means of production. And this is the system that we have. And beneath the government will have 90%, which is just the majority of the people, which will be the people. Now, therefore, it means people who are here, the 90%, they will all seek to get employment in the primary sector, which is mining. Of course, we talked about it, the timber, the raw side of material, and perhaps out of that 90%, perhaps 20% might get employment there. Now, if the secondary sector does exist in a nation, which is supposed to be the biggest sector, by the way, if you have more raw materials, you need to have a larger secondary sector, meaning manufacturing, so that you can manufacture gold. But in our country, we do not have manufacturing, so it's close to non-existent. We do have manufacturing, but it's at a small scale. So we can say only about 5% of South Africans are employed in the secondary sector. Now, when we talk about the tertiary sector, we talk about the financial side of things. We talk about marketing, we talk about financing. That's the corporate world. When we talk about the corporate world and people wear suits and ties and they're proud that they've made it in life, it's when they're working in the corporate. Now, in South Africa, I would say the corporate could be employing roughly around also 20%, looking at the scale of our economy, how big it could become. But because of only 10% of the people own the means of production, they are running the economy at that scale, which is at a small scale, but it continues to breed profits for them because they're taking out raw materials and manufacturing them elsewhere outside of this country for their own benefits, and they don't even invest back in the country. That's why you'll find most cities that have these raw materials don't even have sky rocketing, skyscraping buildings and stuff like that. For example, we look at Dubai. Dubai took about maybe 40 years, 30 years to build what they did because they had the raw material, which was oil. Now, if we have more raw material than than Saudi Arabia, than Dubai, because they have gold, a little bit of gold, and they have oil. What more can we do, to make our cities to become something beautiful and desired in Africa and in the world? The problem is here. Now we have to turn this around. And how do we turn this around? Simple. Just turn the page around. And we have to make sure that the primary sector, the secondary sector, and the tertiary sector, which is the means of production, it's under control and it's managed by the government. Not only does the government regulate it, but the government owns it. And for that to happen, we need a socialist government. And when the socialist government comes into place, that's the only way the means of production will be in the hands of the people. And employment into the primary sector will increase. Employment into the secondary sector will increase. Employment into the tertiary sector will also increase. And it will no longer be under the control of the 10%. We are not saying we are doing away with this 10%. They may still do business, but will make sure that their business does not dictate to the government what the government needs to do in terms of laws, in terms of how it runs its legislature, how it runs its executive, and how it runs its judiciary, which are the three legs of the law. And that's how we get about the socialist system. Now, for this turnaround to take place is by two ways. It's either by a revolution or it's by an uprise of the people without guns, but just an uprise of shutting down the nation to turn around the system. It's as simple as that, because this 10% people do not have power. They're a cabal. And their cabal is maintained by their propaganda machine. Now, their propaganda machine is what we term the media. The media is their tool. It's how they control the 90% of the people through this media, through this propaganda machine, which is their media. So, in order to take over, it means therefore we need to create parallel media, parallel propaganda media, which will uplift the people. And once we uplift the people and the people start seeing, realizing what is happening and understanding the system and how the system is working, they will uprise so that they can own the means of production. And that's when we say we have achieved the national democratic revolution, which is the means of production in the hands of the people. In simple terms. Yeah, I thank you.